Welcome to Get Serious, where at Serious Land Capital, we have invested in over $6 million of vacant land deals with industry-leading 41% operating margins. So today I wanted to give a behind-the-scenes look as we are rapidly building out this Serious Land Capital Chatbot, or in short titled SLC Bot, which is basically compiling all of the content we've ever put together, plus a ton of our internal documentation and learnings, and really every single deal that we have reviewed over the course of us being funders in the space, so representing thousands of deals. All of this is anonymized, of course, and effectively building out at its base case an internal tool so that myself, really anybody on the team, has access to all of our learnings and knowledge and procedural strategies and techniques that we follow as a company, primarily for the sake of underwriting deals, but also as it relates to just general market sentiment and analysis, how we might approach our operations as well too. Those are a bit more secondary, and we'll probably build those in even more going forward here, but primarily focused on the core underwriting piece, since that's what most of our data relates to. And this was all based off of the successful CalChat plus custom GPT that Faulkner and her Uncommon Business team have put together really over the past year. Took a lot of iteration to get it right, but basically they had compiled all of Callan and her team's AI business building strategies and tactics, and put that into a custom GPT, really paywalled for folks who are part of her monthly mastermind group. But they really set the precedent on what you can do with current AI tools in relation to feeding in all the correct data and structuring it in such a way that it can be easily readable and accurately displayed to an end user, regardless of what they might be asking the chatbot. So this has been on our docket for probably a few months, but we had a lot of other higher priority focuses to nail as a company prior to that, not the least of which was just organizing our core data, because I keep repeating this, but if you don't structure and organize your underlying company data or personal data, whatever you're trying to do with AI, like all the outputs and even the inputs are going to fall apart without that. So that really has to be step one, so that you know what the update process is, where your AI is pulling certain information from, because that's going to make everything smoother and everything work much, much better when you actually try to build something out like this. And it's been such an interesting exercise to go forward with this. Obviously, we're using Claude Cowork to build this out. Again, on a daily basis, keeps improving, and it's just an unbelievable tool. You've heard me talk about this a number of times here. No surprise that we're continuing to push it to its limits on a daily basis. And how this differs from what we were trying to do with Land Pricer really over the past 2+ years. First, the technology was just not even close to what was feasible. I'm still astonished by how much money I had invested to now inferior techniques for getting Land Pricer off the ground. And, inherently that business and application is a more ambitious all-around project, because it has to take into account live comp searching and determinations off of numbers related to the market, and aerial map reviews and so forth. Like there's a lot more inputs that require greater technical expertise that is outside of what Cowork can do at the moment. But a kind of core component of Land Pricer that was also related to the offering was just like, okay, how do we translate over Serious Land Capital's expertise in underwriting land deals to get the best price possible when somebody is trying to use the Land Pricer product? So we're taking a chunk of what was going to be delivered there, but just restricting it to a chatbot form, both because again, the technological improvements just makes this way easier to build than in the past. And it's just by nature, again, simpler in terms of its kind of final vision that we want to do. and something that's directly going to service our company that we can handle internally. It doesn't need to be a separate company like Land Pricer did, and something that we can also deliver to the land investing community, similar to how Callan and her team had built out the CalChat format. And so as we were prepping to build this, again, like at its at its core, if we were going to try to build this SLC bot that like pretty much any question you could ask within the land investing space, how to get it to answer in an accurate fashion as if it was my voice coming through to introduce the appropriate nuance and understand where to place guardrails or where to deliver more versus less info and so forth. Like that's very difficult in practice, right? I think any of you can appreciate that, regardless of how often or how in depth you've used AI thus far. And and this is like maybe the greatest piece of this AI explosion in terms of capabilities to enhance productivity and so forth, is just again how much it lowers the inertia factor for procrastination, which again, I've never met an entrepreneur who didn't struggle with that at least sometimes throughout their careers, because again, like by nature, the thing that we should be working on the most, like usually we put off the most just because it's the hairiest problem and it's going to move the most things forward. But with tools like Cowork now, like you can just lower that inertia threshold so much lower, because it's just so much easier to at least start getting the initial steps done, and then you get the ball rolling here, and it just rolls and rolls and rolls much faster than you ever might have anticipated. So it's hard to fully convey that until you've experienced the magic of it yourself here. But like, again, our productivity and what we've been able to build over the past several weeks now is just unlike anything in our entire careers as land investors. And again, this is in the midst of chopping overhead all across the board and stretching every dollar here. So making cuts while productivity goes up is hard to do in practice, but that is exactly what we've been able to do given these technological advancements. And so as I set up this Cowork task, again, I don't want to understate the difficulty in doing this well. And most critically is that we have so much underlying data to work with. Like we have hundreds of podcast episodes, so many newsletters, thousands and thousands of words written, have just enormous amounts of email correspondence going over due diligence and in-depth CRM, thousands of deals that we have notes upon, plus just additional internal documentation on our thought process on how we approach things, how my voice is conveyed, that we've utilized for other AI projects and so forth. Like we have so much that allows the build out for a tool like this to be an easier lift than if we were starting from scratch. Like if you're trying to start from scratch here, like building the actual bot itself, like the custom GPT, like that's no problem. But if you don't have the underlying data and you have to build it all, it could take ages to properly do that, especially if you want to charge money for it too, which is our goal with the SLC bot. It's not going to be a significant expense. We'll have it serve more as a lead magnet for our core funding business, but because of how much info and know-how goes into it and a lot of our internal techniques that we've bled over and internal data, ultimately that's something that we believe earns its own value proposition. So, when I was starting out this process, like it was first telling Cowork, okay, where is all that data located and how, we initially, envision structuring this SLC bot, which I kind of went over earlier in the podcast and our overall strategy and so forth. And that's really a route that Callan and her team had encouraged us to use. Like here's a certain prompt that they had basically reversed engineered from their CalChat to generalize an approach that any other business could use if they wanted to build out a similar type of, CalChat-esque application, which is exactly what we're doing with SLC Chat. Again, given how much data that we had and some of the initial info that I input into Cowork, like it was able to fill out most of that on its own. And then, I went over with a fine tooth comb, like, this voice doesn't sound appropriate here. No, I wouldn't use phrasing like this. Or the approach here just doesn't quite make sense. Like I get it. Like as I'm saying, this sounds more general, but ultimately, again, Cowork is so good at producing, initial iterations to, okay, here's the anticipated project. You gave us a bunch of info. Like, let's try to break these down into next steps here and take a look at this. Are we on the right track? And then you just review like a manager and like go back and forth, back and forth. And when I felt more comfortable with, the approach that we were utilizing, who we were targeting, which data sources were more primary versus secondary, and so forth, and making sure that Cowork had access to all of them. Then it was time to, okay, let's start building this out with this vision in mind. And because we have Cowork attached to Notion, which again, I would say Notion is kind of the gold standard for just information management, especially visually. It's almost hard to describe again what like all the capabilities of Notion. It can be a meeting summarizer, a CRM. It can be a task manager, a journal. Just all around note compilation tool. Plus, it has AI in the background, and it can attach or connect to Cowork pretty seamlessly. Super powerful tool here. And the task management and the CRM side is like kind of primary to what we utilize it for. And so I had asked Cowork, okay, let's build out this process for building out this SLC bot and have it added directly into our home task manager and break out the subtasks or the subtasks of the subtasks and assign dates to them based on like realistic delivery dates to move forward with, now that we have an anticipated plan for what we want to do. And like also, okay, what's the first iteration going to look like? When do we bring in some initial testers? If we wanted to turn this into a paywall product outside of our internal team, here's a tool that we would choose and the approach vector that we would utilize for that. And it just handled this brilliantly. And I don't know if like some of you listening might get it as much of a thrill, but like on a task manager form, just like, even for small tasks, like just checking things off. Okay, we're in progress there. We're done there. Like there's always like a nice little dopamine hit. Maybe I'm the only one, but I think a lot of people can relate to that. Just like, okay, yeah, something's accomplished. Something's moving forward here. So like we had spent all that initial time just to set the groundwork for it. And we had, this SLC bot divided up into 4 phases. And I'll just read them off here in front of me. Like this phase 1 was just the knowledge processing. So it's like, okay, how do we boil down all of the knowledge that we have into the correct knowledge base that is the most concise and accurately formatted for a custom GPT or an LLM to be able to read. So like this gets really technical quickly, but is absolutely critical for the function of the underlying application. And like this is probably the stuff that not enough people appreciate in order to how to structure your data so that the AIs can read it and pull up information quickly and accurately for demonstration to the end user. And so very fortunate, again, we had some underlying knowledge-based documentation from CalChat and how they had spent a year testing different formats to make sure that their custom GPT was working appropriately. And so we were able to then link that into our Cowork and say, okay, we know this format is stress tested and it works. How do we translate our data into a format like this? And interestingly, Cowork, even as it was going over this, was actually making suggestions on top of what Callan's team had already done. They're like, hey, they're probably leaving like 15% of bandwidth on the table here because of the file type that they're utilizing for the knowledge base. And so we were able to fix that and now make our system even more efficient because, again, these models are just able to pull from community reviews or where people have struggled with certain knowledge base, like they understand how to do all of this. So then we can just make it much more efficient and build out the exact files that are needed for the core brain, if you will, of the custom GPT, which again, if I had to do all of this from scratch, like if we didn't spend well over a year now just producing content, like for so long, and sometimes it feels like you're banging your head on the wall, you see like lower views and all that, but it's like, okay, all of this was also serving another purpose to just continue to add to our knowledge base of what we have learned, and so that we can utilize this data in other, potentially even more efficient or value add ways. So we're just repurposing things that we've already done before that have taken hours and hours, hundreds of hours, if not thousands, to produce at this point, which is really the moat that we had built. Because again, if we were starting from nothing, like I can't overstate that enough. Like it would have been so much harder to do this. Whereas like Cowork, it's labeling these certain days for, okay, we can get this test done by this day, and like we'll basically knock out a subtask every single day roughly, and maybe we'll finish up this project within a month or so and get it off live and more thoroughly tested on the market. But because we had so much of the underlying data, and Cowork can just structure the data into the files that it needs because it knows the end goal, it basically didn't need me to review virtually anything. It could do its own quality assurance along the way. And so like the initial phase one of this knowledge processing didn't need me to determine any of this, or like, out of the 300 or so podcasts that we've done so far, is like, okay, that's a lot to parse through. Can we sort out maybe the top 50 that might be the most relevant for this particular initial version of the SLC bot? And so I gave it some guidelines on which podcasts or even topics that I thought would be better. And then it was able to search all 300 and determine, okay, yeah, we got down to like 48 or so that are going to fit the certain criteria I want to pull from off the bat, without me needing to go back in and select all the different podcasts or see what I talked about. Like it is such a remarkable tool when it comes to data processing, assuming you have that underlying data, and avoiding all of that manual nonsense of having to go through and select things. It's the drudgery of that. And I've done that in the past, and it sucks. No one wants to do that, but now these AI tools just allow you to just boom, automate it. And so I was able to get well over a week ahead of the anticipated milestone schedule, all within one day, because it's like, okay, boom, we knocked out one, you get that little check mark, you get that dopamine hit, and Cowork's okay, you want to move on to the next step? It's like, well, why not? Yeah, you just push as much as you can for stuff that I don't need to actively review here. And then we can take a break for the end of day, so then I can come back fresh for the stuff that I'm actually going to need to iterate back and forth. And so we finish up that whole phase one, all the subtasks, and now we're on this phase two, which is the custom instructions and the GPT build. So, and this largely was pretty simple. Like Cowork just produced, hey, here are the exact files that you're going to upload to the custom GPT. This is exactly what you need to put in, the custom instructions, do all of that, and then we're going to start testing. And we need to do this voice calibration. So, hey, here's a list of 15 questions across all of these different topics that we can utilize to test out. Is the content appropriate? Is the format appropriate? Is the voice appropriate? And here's a grading rubric to utilize. Here's an area for you to input what the custom GPT is giving you, and then your notes on how it can be improved. Are the guardrails in place? Is it giving away confidential information? What are certain tags for what needs to be improved? And all of this was produced into another Notion document that was super easy for me just to, it's in front of me right now on my other screen, where I can just look at it and see, okay, we're going to test out this question. I'm going to input here. So easy to utilize. And then, I can just piecemeal go back to Cowork and like, okay, let's address the issues for this one, then we can retest. So that this is where it starts to get more difficult and grinding to deal with. But this is really the secret sauce, right? Because like similar to when we were doing land prices, like I was not going to release this publicly unless I was absolutely certain about the quality. And so like similar for this SLC bot, need it to be like we have built a reputation around nuance, accurate underwriting and approaches to land investing. So if we are not getting that conveyed through this, custom GPT solution, then we need to continue to refine it. But again, we reduce the inertia so much because the refining process is so much more simple, because then I'm not the one who has to go update all the knowledge base files. Like I submit, I have my Whisper flow on. I just say, yeah, this is not really working. Here's why. Throw it back to Cowork. It takes all that feedback, lists it out. Okay, yeah, we're going to fix this file here, make these adjustments so this error won't come back out. Okay, let's retest to see if it fixed it. So then you're not stuck doing any of that manual work on the back end. So it's, again, much more managerial to actually do this. Way easier to just stick with the program and just make tons of if I was trying to do this again like a year ago, I just can't get over how much easier this technology is making it to build out a chatbot like this. Like, again, even a year ago in the past, this would have cost tens of thousands of dollars to produce this. You got to have some engineering help and some design and so forth. Now Cowork can handle all of that. It just needs the underlying data, which I had already produced within the company structure. And so that's phase 2. That's where we're at right now. But again, we're way ahead of schedule with doing that. I can just knock out a few voice questions day by day, refine. Okay, once it's internally good enough from my end, bring in my team member. And then we have some beta testers already lined up who wanted to help out with this. If you already hear this podcast, feel free to reach out to me directly and say you want to test this as well. And then we're just going to daily iterate. Make sure, okay, we're getting all these tests in. What do we need to refine further? And then once we're pretty settled there, the knowledge base is solid. It's answering questions, right 85 to 90% of the time, roughly. Then we can do external deployment. We already have the paid solution, the wrapper, to add all of this directly into. It's not difficult. That technology already exists. We already have our providers set up for that. And then we can just release it out into the wild. Again, this has turned into a potential several week, multi-month process to really nail down, to all of a sudden, you can build one of these apps in, a couple weeks if you're really, really pushing on it and refining like crazy, which we are. So hopefully this gives you an idea on, both what we're doing internally, the advantages that we do have, but also a level playing field in terms of building something similar if you wanted to pursue a direction like this, and just understanding how powerful a tool like Cowork is to really take your business to the next level and vibe code your way to basically anything you want. So if all of that is interesting, again, reach out if you want to test out this bot. And again, I referenced Callan a number of times. She was the inspiration for why we even built this in the first place. And the current bot would not work nearly as good as it is right now without having her team system in place. Again, I've already been testing this custom GPT, and again, I'm super perfectionist when it comes to having my voice translated over from an AI perspective. And right away, there were already some answers I really don't need to change anything. And this is really early on in the testing process. This is getting better by the day, but within the first 3 or 4 uses, it's yeah, there's maybe one sentence that needs to be slightly adjusted here. It is really nailing what I was hoping for. So the iteration process, I don't think is going to be nearly as painful as I might have been anticipating prior to getting this ball rolling. So if you want to sign up for Callan's bootcamp, by the way, the Effortless Business Bootcamp, see the information below in the show notes. It starts April 21st. So, running out of time if you haven't signed up already. And by the way, if you sign up with my link, you get free session with me going over Claude Cowork, direct applications for your business, certain techniques that I can just give you the exact copy paste skills. You can be off and running within 5 minutes, doing some of these absolutely magical techniques for your own business there. So please sign up if you're at all interested in taking your AI game to the next level. These are the best from the best. The best of the best that are progressing in that domain right now. SeriousLand.capital if you're looking for any deal funding, $50K purchase price and up. Looking forward to next time to subscribe and share, everybody. Take care now.